Hi guys, Jess here. So today I wanted to show you a propagation update of the leaves that I propagated 2 months ago. They're doing really well. I wanted to just share a couple tips, what I've changed in my routine of taking care of them, and just show you the progress that they've made. Okay, so here's the propagation tray after a couple of months. As you can see, it's a little bit more chaotic than it was, but not a ton has changed. This one here was actually cutting. That one, ignore. I just needed a couple. I just needed a little bit more room for it. But otherwise, over here, you can see this one and this one I've already removed the leaf from. I'll show you how to remove the leaf on a couple of these. But as you can see, they're doing really well. The roots on those ones are looking great. I'll show you how to remove those. And then I just kind of want to show you guys what I do now that we're at this step. Here's an opalina that I grew in this tray. So here's another propagation tray of mine here. This is actually succulents that I have all propagated from leaf or have taken as a cutting from an adult succulent. So essentially what I did is once the succulents grew to a decent size, I separated all of them off from each other. So I'll show you an example of what I mean here. Okay, so I'm going to show you how I remove a couple of these leaves. This is a completely optional step. You can wait for your succulent to keep growing and the leaves will fall off on their own. I just personally like to make sure all the roots get into the soil and are receiving the nutrients that are in the soil and from the water that I'm giving it. And so I've just found that removing the leaf at this stage is some of the easiest ways to ensure that. But here's this. So trying really careful not to remove the roots. You kind of want to feel this leaf. If it's dry like this end, it's ready to come off and it should just pinch off right away. If not, you can kind of just twist it. If some of the leaves fall off, like here, that's fine too. There we go. So those leaves stuck to the roots here. So then I'm just going to plant this back into the soil, making sure that all these roots are underneath the surface. That's okay. I've also just been really busy with graduating, so they have been a little bit more neglected than I would have liked them to be. One thing I do like doing is finding leaves that look either diseased or unhealthy and just removing them from the propagation station just in case. So this one's looking really well. He has some nice roots. His roots aren't burnt yet. They are dry though. So I want to get them in the soil as soon as I can. So this leaf isn't as crispy as the other ones. However, it should easily come off as well. There we go. And there you have that. Now these ones do get a lot of sunlight, so that's why their roots don't look phenomenal, but okay, now, so to water this, I take my spray bottle first and I spray the top of everything. What this does is it just ensures that the soil is slightly moist so that when the water hits it from my syringe, it doesn't spread all the succulents everywhere. So then I take my garden syringe. I will include a link to this below, as well as to the video of how to propagate. And then I just suck up some water from a bucket that I bring in my room here, like that. And then I just start to lightly, drizzle the water across here. I usually start in one corner and just lightly go through. Because my propagation tray is under so much light, you really do need to water it a lot more than if your propagation tray was somewhere more shaded. Keeping them a little bit more shaded usually results in a little bit healthier succulent. However, sometimes they grow a lot faster here. There's definitely a fine line of transition. So when you're propagating succulents, my advice would be to originally start with your succulents in a darker location. Not dark, but indirect light location. And then once your succulent has rooted, move that into a bright light location, because you can kind of see that it happened to this opalina here, but it started getting a lot taller, and that's because it wasn't in much light, and so that's why I moved it into this tray, and that's why a lot of these roots are burning, because they're all together. So your success rate will be a lot higher if you keep them in the shade until they all have a couple more roots. Now, opalinas and a couple of these other succulents are going to do just fine with a lot more of this light exposure, especially if their original leaf is a lot thicker. It's going to be able to provide a lot more nutrients to the plant before it dries up, whereas some of these smaller succulent leaves are not going to be able to provide that. So here's the tray fully watered. I really like to do this once or twice a week. I actually think I did this about 3 days ago, and even that might have been a little bit too long. The container that I have them in is just the bottom half of a seed starting tray, and so it doesn't have any drainage holes, which is fine for succulents like this because the roots aren't very deep and I'm not watering them by soaking the entire soil all the way through, and so they're not going to be affected by root rot for this. If you do have problems with mealybugs, my suggestion would be to use a pumice so that it dries out a lot quicker. Also, removing the leaves will allow you to see those mealybugs and provide a little bit of maintenance. Bugs love dead leaves on succulents, and so by removing those, you're preventing your bugs from getting at your succulents here. So here's another propagation tray of mine here. This is actually succulents that I have all propagated from leaf or have taken as a cutting from an adult succulent. So essentially what I did is once the succulents grew to a decent size, I separated all of them off from each other. So I'll show you an example of what I mean here. Okay, so a succulent like this, there's 1, 2, and 3 heads. So what I did is I just clipped off all these heads, and same with this one here. This Debbie is from 1. I don't know if you'll be able to see the connector there, but it has 2 heads as well. And like, as you can see from these ones, that's going to have multiple heads on each one of those. So what I did is I just separated every single head that was of a decent size. I waited till they were about this size and then separated them. I also just have a couple random leaves thrown in here because I needed a little bit of extra room. But to water this, it's the exact same method that I use up above. Now, a lot of these don't have roots or didn't have roots when I cut them because I cut off all of the roots from them. So I'll just try to see if one has some roots here. It's resisting a little bit when I pull it up, so the roots have begun to form, which is great. And then same thing with this. This is actually the top of that same seed starting tray, so it doesn't have any drainage holes as well. So I water it in the exact same method that I use for all of the leaves. I start by spraying it down so that the water doesn't pool and run around, and then I use my water syringe. Now these ones here are extremely small. I am more using them to see if they'll do anything, not really expecting that they will. Whereas some of these here that are a little bit bigger than a quarter are going to do just fine. This is just more of my way of separating them out so that they grow a little faster when they're in the same container or connected together. A lot of times they have stalled growth because they can't keep growing because the other succulent's in the way. So that's my method for doing that. Another maintenance thing that I do in this tray to try to keep it a little bit regulated, and I don't do this very often because they are still using these leaves, but in order just to prevent the bugs, as you can see here, kind of more on this one, there's a dead leaf underneath of this. So once, let's see if this one has any roots. They're starting to come up. You can kind of start to see the roots here. But I will probably go and remove these leaves once they've become crispy dry, because I want them to use up all of the nutrients since they don't have any roots yet. So I hope that propagation video was helpful. I'll provide the links below to the propagation video, how to take cuttings, all the ones that I've probably mentioned in this video. And I'll also provide a link to that garden syringe that I use. So please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss anything else. Thanks. Bye.